Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to our Career Conversations panel on discovering green careers. So starting on the left, we have James Calderone, and he is manager at Homestarts Incorporated. To the right of him, we've got Michael Charendoff, who's with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. To the right of, or the left to you, of Michael, we have Lauralyn Johnston, who's with the City of Toronto. And next to her is Christina Scrow, who is with the York Region. And next to her is Sophia Sestito, who is with EllisDon.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Sophia, I work at EllisDon, and I am the Environmental Project Coordinator in the Civil Department, but I also am a key person for the whole company. So if there's RFPs, which is requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, which are RFQs, I read all the background documents. So phase ones, phase twos, noise and vibration, evaluations, endangered species, whatever it entails for that specific job. I read all the documents, and then I prepare a spreadsheet, and from that, then I tell what the risk mitigation would be for the job. Then I also look at what permits we would need, how much it would cost, bring that back to the project team who's bidding on the project. Once we get the job, then I actually get to go on site once a month, or if there's anything else that I need to do, I'll go back another time, but it's usually once a month I visit all the civil sites, make sure I do the environmental inspection for that site, do any risk mitigation, make sure they have all the proper permits in place, make sure that there's nothing that would be an issue that we could be held liable for. Well, then I have to do all my daily reports and receive all the site visits that other people have done, so site supers, construction managers, project managers, anyone who's part of that project, part of that team, sends me the documentation that they're doing on a regular basis. And then I compilate it all, put it together in another spreadsheet to make sure that, again, we're doing our due diligence, we are managing our risks, we are not doing anything that would cause any issues, we're abiding by the permits. If we need to renew a permit, so TRCA, if we have to work outside a window that we're knowing well before, we have to tell them that we might be working in a non-waterworks time, that we're providing the information well ahead of time so we can potentially get that permit and explain why we can't fit that window. And yeah, I think that's, as a whole, what I do.
Okay. Christina?
So I am the Senior Active Transportation Specialist for York Region. This is a fairly new position for me. Before that I was in private consulting for a planning consulting firm, and that dealt with mainly land development. Here at the region, what I'm basically doing is I'm in charge of sort of updating and I guess trying to enforce our master plan for cycling and pedestrian sort of oriented planning. And so through that, and I guess as part of the position, I'm also in charge of all of the region's committees that manage the 9 municipalities in York Region. And so we welcome municipal representatives onto different committees to take a look at how we can update our maps and sort of promote a more active, I guess, lifestyle and transportation mode in the region of York. And so I am also in charge of all of our outreach programs, so that includes schools, area municipalities, and the public. And that's about it so far, but I'm sure it will grow as I've been in it a bit longer.
Okay, so it helps to understand what I do when you understand the context in which I do it. So the first thing is that the province of Ontario has a bunch of laws in place, the Planning Act in particular, that says that intensification, and the provincial policy statement that say that intensification is of a benefit to the people of Ontario in that it allows more people to live in a more efficient way, and it's an efficient use of resources and infrastructure, which is why this is considered sort of a green career planning in general. The Planning Act also says that affordable housing is also important. These two things sometimes conflict because sometimes the best way to intensify is to demolish things that are already existing, and they are often affordable. So the City of Toronto has a series of policies in place in the official plan around housing and intensification. I work with those policies both in terms of researching how the policies are working in terms of their implementation and amending those policies, but also in making sure that those policies are implemented in the cases where developments come in and we have places where the policies apply. So I basically oversee the implementation of mostly the rental demolition and housing requirements, but also through intensifications and through large site developments like the York University lands development here, Downsview, East Bayfront, and now we're getting more and more actually policies where we will be requiring new affordable housing in large sites on private land. So I work with the community planners who are the development planners on files, but also with developers directly, social housing providers and affordable housing providers. They're not the same thing. The tenants in developments that are being demolished, the community in the area around places where these new intensifications are going to happen, but also with politicians and other authorities who are decision makers in this process. Generally, I'm dealing on a day-to-day basis with architects, engineers, other planners, lawyers, and investment-oriented people, so the investment community. And that's pretty much who I talk to on a daily basis. Lots of lawyers.
Cool. My name is Michael, and I think I'll pick up on your theme of giving a little bit of context. I work for Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, TRCA, and we are also mandated to exist. There's a provincial piece of legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act, and which mandates our existence. The TRCA is very broad and diverse in the work that they do. So we just heard about some permit work that we do. I don't do that personally. It's a different division. We have planners, ecologists, biologists. We run the conservation areas like Courtright Conservation Area or Albion Hills Conservation Area. We also have a watershed management division. And so I work in the watershed management division. And within that division, we have a group of people that work on watershed planning. And so I'm on that team, within a team, and I'm on another team called the Don River Watershed team. And so with my team, what we do is we work with all sorts of stakeholders to implement the watershed plan for the Don River watershed and hopefully actually improve the health of the Don River watershed. So that's broadly what I do, and some of what that looks like actually on a day-to-day level is it's a lot of community engagement, a lot of community environmental education, working with different politicians, working with different community groups, non-governmental organizations to engage people and collaborate with people to deliver innovative and interesting projects that raise the profile of some of the challenges that are faced in the Don watershed, as well as some of the solutions that we know about to hopefully get projects put on the ground that will have a measurable improvement for the health of the Don River watershed. So my job is so diverse and dynamic. Like I couldn't just list like, okay, I do these 10 things. It's not like that. I do everything and anything and all sorts of random things, from running an annual eco festival in the town of Richmond Hill called Mill Pond Splash to running an event that we do called Paddle the Don, where we allow people to actually paddle down the Don River, to coordinating a body called the Don Watershed Regeneration Council. On the council, there's about 5 or 6 politicians. The Don watershed comprises a few different municipalities: the regional municipality of York, town of Richmond Hill, Markham, Vaughan, and the city of Toronto. So they have political representation on the council. There's also York University students who are on the Don Watershed Regeneration Council. We came and gave a presentation here last year when we were doing our recruitment, and we had about 4 or 5 York University students apply to sit on the council, and now they're part of the team of about 30 people that work to implement the watershed plan and that advocate for the health of the Don watershed. So that's a broad overview. I think more details will come out throughout the talk, and please ask further questions, but that's pretty much what I'm up to.
So before I begin, I have to ask,
Yeah.
you said paddling down the Don. Are people not allowed to paddle down the Don typically? Like, if anybody gets on the river, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's not advisable. So what we actually do is does anybody know the dam, G. Ross Lower Dam at Finch and Dufferin? Show of hands, anybody?
Where the bus turns around for the 196.
There's a big dam there. That was one of the first projects that TRCA built back in the day when we were doing hard engineering, hard infrastructure projects in order to mitigate flooding. And so what we do once a year is we actually release some of the water in the dam around 4 o'clock in the morning. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, once that water's come downstream a little bit, the water level has risen enough that makes it such that it makes it safer to paddle down the Don. And we put a lot of...
Rocks.
Yeah, you do.
If you're caught
Lots of rocks.
paddling down the Don any other day, you know, are you going to get to take
It's mostly rocks.
I have no comments.
So again, advisable is or not advisable?
Not advisable. I would not advocate for that. If you're interested in paddling down the Don, I encourage you to do that. Registration will start in a little while, and the event will be May 4th. And a great opportunity to bring people into a space where they can interact with the natural environment, which is a key step along the way in order to encourage a sense of stewardship and ownership for our shared space. So yeah, come out and paddle the Don on May 4th.
Okay, so actually, just picking up on what Michael was saying, I do work around shared space. My focus is though on multi-residential development. I work with a group called Homestarts, and we provide consulting and sort of classic property management services to social housing sites. And these social housing sites are ones that don't fall under the umbrella of the large providers like Toronto Community Housing. And there are many co-ops, for example, throughout the city that are managed by an independent group of members, residents of the building, and I facilitate their governance of these sites. I've been doing the work for a couple years. My day-to-day is always incredibly varied. But it typically involves like sort of the core responsibilities, administration of rent geared to income subsidy, sort of classic property management, maintenance of the buildings themselves, and then really community governance, really supporting that as much as possible. It's a green career in a way. Principally, I think, because of the work you do around the built environment. It's one thing to build, for example, a green building. One of the properties in my portfolio is a local 75 housing co-op. It's at 60 Richmond Street East. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. It's LEED Gold. And it was sort of touted as one of these beautiful projects that was a marriage of social and environmental concepts. But it's one thing to put these things together. It's a completely different thing
To run it.
to manage it, to make sure that all the systems are working the way that they're supposed to. So I've had the fun, the privilege of trying to make that happen.
Is a brief overview of your career story. So what brought you to this point?
Okay. Well, ironically, I only graduated in October 2013. I picked up my diploma this afternoon, actually, because I didn't go to convocation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I took a little bit longer to do my MES here at York than is, I guess, typical. Instead of 2 years, I did in 3. And it's because I took a job coming out of my first year doing this work with Homestarts. It was an opportunity that I thought, I couldn't pass up. It provided me with a lot of on-the-ground experience, which I felt I needed. It's one thing to look at these things through an academic lens. It's another thing to see how they play out on the ground. And I don't regret it. It took a little bit longer, but it's been fantastic. And my MRP was on land use planning and housing. That was the, the area of concentration. And it looked at different models of affordable housing, particularly those that can be developed in the absence of public funding, which is sort of the environment we find ourselves in now. That's that.
Cool. So I did my Bachelor of Arts in International Development Studies from McGill University, and learned a lot about a lot of different things. But I think that the key takeaway is that I really just pursued what I was interested in learning about and what I really found fascinating. So I chose to not pursue something that I felt would give me a career or make me money. I just pursued what I was interested in. Following that, I worked as a professional fundraiser for a little bit, which got some good skills in terms of face-to-face communication. I mean, I don't want to do professional fundraising for the rest of my life, but I didn't want to, but it was a good experience. I then lived in Central America for about a year at an environmental education retreat center in the jungle, and hung out with animals and plants, and that was pretty fantastic. Came back to Toronto, worked for Greenpeace for a little bit, again doing the fundraising. Then I did my MES here at York University, where I was really looking at organizational sustainability strategy. I ended up doing an internship halfway through the MES program. I was the first year where they offered a internship through the World Green Building Council, and I got shipped off to Indonesia and lived in Jakarta, Indonesia for a few months with the Indonesian Green Building Council doing business case for green building stuff. Finished the MES program and took another internship. It was a joint internship between Environmental Defense and Xerox Canada, really looking at corporate sustainability strategy. And then I moved into a 5-month contract with TRCA as a stewardship coordinator, which then led to my current role as the project coordinator for the Don River Watershed. So that's kind of the arc. But I think when it comes to your question, which was like, what was your original interest? I think that, and I think most people are aware here, that there are some pretty serious challenges that the world is facing. And it's interesting to me to participate in implementing some of the solutions that we know about. So my interest has always been to find a space where I could best leverage my interests and my capacities and my knowledge to address some of the challenges that we're facing. And that's been my focus, and I've just taken jobs and I've looked for jobs that are in line with that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so I did my BES. I was the second year of BES, actually, so that was a while ago. It was a very different program then. It was a lot more like the master's program was. So when I decided to go back to school, because I had a whole bunch of questions about how the world worked in city and municipal politics, I decided that the MES was probably going to be my best bet for being able to do that. I also ended up taking 3 years, but that's because there was a giant strike in the middle of it. So I got sort of prorogued. I actually had my MRP all ready to be handed in, and they went on strike like the next day. I actually had it all bound and everything. Yeah. So I spent 4.5 months basically doing volunteer work, going to as many public meetings as I could, basically spending my time out in the community and networking in the planning space and professional planning space. I did join OPPI as a student. I was not particularly active in it, but I did go to occasional events. I did meet other planners and found out sort of where in the planning spectrum I might be interested in ending up. That didn't happen. So I ended up just walking into 2009, massive economic crash in terms of land use planning. So land use had been booming. Quite honestly, Toronto still is very busy, and we are very busy at the City of Toronto in terms of reviewing development applications and the number of applications that come in on a daily basis. But in general, the entire market was contracting, and so I walked into that market as a new planner, and I just basically went and I applied for everything. Like if it had planning in it anywhere, I applied to it unless it said technologist, because I was like, I do not want to be that for the rest of my life. I did not do GIS because I don't want to do GIS for the rest of my life. People can go and get a college certificate in that, and that's fantastic. If you understand how the tool works, that's more than enough for the level that I work at now. And I went out and I applied for very short contracts because short contracts allow you to see a job very intensely, very quickly. You become an expert in what it is that you're doing. You do a project, and then you're looking for the next thing to do. But you become an expert in what that was very quickly. And also, because they're short, people who have 8 or 10 years experience are not going to take a 6-week contract. They're just not. So that means that you get to be underfilled, which means you get a lot more responsibilities and the pay is actually better. So if you can deal with the fact that you don't have vacation, you pay union fees and dues, but you never belong to a union, and you have a lot of instability in your life, it's actually a really interesting way to see a career from a higher level than you would normally see as a junior associate. I took my third contract. I took a contract at the City of Regina. I moved there for 2 years on a 2-year contract and became a senior planner 1 year after graduation. So it paid okay, and it certainly paid well enough to move to Regina. I moved my daughter to Regina. We moved to Regina 2 years, and then I came back again. I got invaluable experience being able to work in a smaller municipality with a very different purview, under a different planning regime, different types of politics and land politics, and a different sense of what does sustainability mean in particular. It was a very interesting thing to do. I don't want to live there forever. I liked it very much, but it's not my forever job. So here I am back in Toronto, and this is what I am doing now. I enjoy housing. I find it very interesting. It's an interesting intersection between people and politics and actually like development and the way that we are looking at building our future city for the next 50 years. And I really enjoy that.
Okay, so my undergraduate degree, I had a double major, and it was kind of a funny mix. It was communication studies and health and society, which at the time they fought me on because no one had done that before, and they didn't want to declare it as sort of a double major that I could take. And then I was just pestering them all the time, and they just agreed. So I ended up doing that, and actually what I loved about it was that communication studies had such a wide umbrella under which you could take a ton of different courses, from statistics, like economics, urban studies, a whole bunch of different ones. And then it was sort of melded with my interest in health, which worked for me. So I was actually heading more towards law school. And then in my second or third year, I think it was, of my undergrad, I took a course in urban studies with Professor John Caulfield, which I'm sure some of you might know. And it was sort of kind of like where everything changed. That's where I really became interested in planning and development, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to land 100%, so I scrapped everything else. I enrolled in the MES program, and from there I sort of got a sense of what I liked. So I spent, I think, my second year in the program doing back-to-back internships for a good solid year in 3 different municipalities, and I just got a taste of everything: heritage and parks planning, development planning, and through that I started sort of honing in. And I knew I was interested in the sort of more active transportation or sort of healthy communities planning, something a bit more green. But at the time, there weren't so many positions available after graduation. So I took a job at a private firm, and that's what I mentioned before in land development. And that was lasted a couple years. And then it was my time to go because it just wasn't for me, and I wanted to try something different. So I kind of took a leap of faith, and I left. I took on some other things, and then I got this job kind of shortly after. So it worked out well, and yeah, I guess the key was sort of what Lauralyn was mentioning, is that, I mean, it's really good to try a bunch of different things if you have the chance to do it, and just to get a taste of what you like, because you might go in with a totally different idea and come out hating it and despising it and want to go into something different. So it's kind of my takeaway for today.
Okay, wow. Not a planner. I've never been interested in urban planning. I actually entered university to be a psychiatrist. And after my first year, I took a politics class, and they talked about the degradation of the environment. And I'm like, this resonates with me, and it's something I'd like to learn more about. And knowing how emotional I can be, I decided maybe psychology is not the best thing for me, because I'd probably go home and need a psychiatrist myself. So I decided to look into the BS program, and I transferred in my second year. I don't have a master's. I didn't do an internship. I don't have any of the experience that these other fellow wonderful people have. But what I do have was perseverance, and what I would like to show is that you don't necessarily have to go to another area of the world to pursue what you're interested in. If that's where it takes you, fantastic. And I think the values and the experience that these other people have experienced have shaped and grown who they are. But I've been able to figure out what I wanted to do in the jobs I've had. So I actually started at a consulting firm dealing with asbestos and mold. Exciting, right? Not so much. But it taught me what I need to know about where I want to go. And I worked for a smaller firm. It was construction control in Woodbridge. I learned about roofing. I learned about structural integrity of buildings. I learned paving. And that's how I actually got my next job at a bigger company, which was at the time Sheen & Heeker, and now it was bought by an Australian company that's now called Coffee Geotechnics. And I ended up starting as a project manager in the paving and geotechnical because I had that background that I was exposed to without even knowing I even like it. I ended up loving it. Then I wanted to pursue something that I actually had gone to school for and something I'm actually passionate about. So I applied for a project managing position as an environmental project manager. Got the position. I was dealing with CCDCs, dealing with looking at building structures, dealing with the environmental contamination, so soil, groundwater, air quality, noise and vibration. So it encompassed everything, which at the time, when I was doing it at this little company, I was like, I don't really care about this. But it led me to where I am now, and having all those past experiences, working for TTC, working for Oxford, working for Margard, I was able to transfer that to not consulting, but to what, well, EllisDon is a construction company, mostly considered general contractors. But from that, I was able to show them how it's important that all of these elements need to be incorporated into every contract. And if it's not part of it, there might be a risk that they're not identifying. And that's what I bring value to the table. So just never question the roads you follow, and maybe sometimes the things you think you're not going to learn something from, you actually do. So looking back, I didn't think I'd care at all about asbestos, but I can go into any mall and be like, yep, and talk to the property manager. And I bring that back to EllisDon, the ICC department, and we talk about that. So
Both Michael and Christina mentioned doing internships, and Lauralyn, you mentioned doing a lot of volunteer work as well. So for people who haven't yet graduated and are still studying, what sort of experience would you recommend that students start getting now so that they can have an advantage later on, using your knowledge of your own industries? Let's start with James again.
I didn't do an internship. I guess I did, actually, with the TRCA, but it was not much of one, I hate to say. It was off-site work, and I just didn't spend much time in the office, and anyway.
I'll let them know.
Yeah, please. No, I think it's getting out there doing any kind of volunteer work, sort of as was touched on before, like even remotely related to your interests is incredibly valuable. It's tough to get the first job. There's no doubt about that. Once you get something, even if it's 6 months to a year, it gives you some leverage for future work. But getting that first job is difficult, and it requires a very least volunteer experience, networking, and all that. So I would say get out there, do things, and don't just look for like that perfect job too. Even related to your varied interests. Even if it's you got to get your hands dirty doing something. I'm going to be harping on that point, I think, throughout this panel, is that, on-the-ground experience I find to be incredibly important. It'd be easier to get a job doing what I'm doing than so much other work related to housing. And yet, it still is very much related and, I would argue equally important. So, that's my 2 cents on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of that. It is tough to break out, get your first job, and really any experience is better than none. So York has some great resources. I was fortunate, as I mentioned earlier, to participate in, I think it was, what's it called? The York Internship Program? Is that what it's called?
York International.
Yeah, York International Internship Program. They have a whole office and program with lots of different internships that are available. And so I applied to one that was a good fit based on my background, and was fortunate enough to do it. And it was a fantastic thing to do. And once you start doing things like that, adding in some volunteer work, adding in a job that you do, you start building some sort of competency and some confidence, and it puts you on a path. So, yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is really the idea of relentless pursuit. And if you have an idea of something you wanna pursue it relentlessly. Tackle your goals in short-term phases, and just go for it. Like it can be easy to get discouraged, but what you want to do is try to cultivate a sense of your own resiliency, so that you can deal with those challenges and keep pushing forward. But there's no doubt it is challenging. I took a second internship, as I mentioned, and that was through looking at different career websites. Like goodworkcanada.ca is a pretty good resource, especially for people who are pretty early in their career. They're usually a lot of entry-level positions, but it's in the green career space, and that's actually how I heard about my second internship that I took, Good Work Canada. So I was pretty relentless in trying to find that first job. I applied to maybe like 30 or 40 different jobs after grad school before I got a couple interviews and before I got that position. So it can be very challenging putting your energy out there all the time, writing job applications one after the next, and then not hearing anything back. That definitely happened a lot. And if you stop there, then you stop there. You gotta keep going, and eventually, hopefully, something will happen.
Yeah, the relentless job application is definitely. I have written, I think, over 300 CVs now.
Yeah.
And so that's 5 years, 300 CVs.
Unique ones too.
Yeah, each one is slightly different and tailored to the position. And it has, I learned a lot working while I was doing my GA-ship, doing grants. And so looking at the language of what is being presented to you and reflecting that back into the job application process was actually very useful. And going forward in terms of writing reports to council and other things like that and other types of documents, that's actually been a really useful skill. So being able to write a good job application and a good letter is actually a very, very marketable skill in a way that you probably don't realize until you actually get the work. And it's what you get out, what you put in terms of volunteer work, in terms of your first job. It's not just about the first job, it's about your first reference. And so the people who will vouch for you and will network for you and on your behalf saying, yeah, I've worked with this person and they're really good. There's an informal network that we never see until you get actually into it. And then all of a sudden people start saying, so, you worked with that person at this city, what were they like? And people will ask you. And it is an informal one. And I mean, there's double-blind processes and things like that that are mandated through HR and through the union processes that are on one level, but there still is an informal network of hearing where things are going to happen and being able to have a job application ready. In particular on the private side, where there isn't a mandated window, they put out an ad, they get 10 CVs in, and they close, basically. And it's not a time-based, like it'll say open for 3 months, but it isn't open for 3 months. They've hired within 2.5 weeks. And so waiting until that last deadline isn't going to do you any good if you're applying for those types of positions. So knowing that and being ready for those opportunities when they come up. was really helpful. And also in terms of finding places to volunteer and do volunteer work, because even in the terms of the networking and everything else, they can tell you where you will find volunteer work that would give you the skills that you can then put forward and you can put on your CV.
So we mentioned a bit about volunteering, and I wanted to say that my first internship that I remember came out of the town of Oakville. They had put a posting for a heritage planning intern, and I remember the fur was flying at the time because all of these students were clamoring for this internship. And I have to tell you first and foremost that it was an unpaid internship. You only went in 2 days a week, and the competition for this internship was so fierce that I remember being surprised and thinking, but these people are not getting paid. I thought I was going to be the smart one to apply for this because people want to get paid, and I was willing to work for nothing. But people were thinking, of course, the same thing, all of my peers. And what I had to do, I can't tell you, to prepare for this interview for something that I thought was just going to be this little insignificant thing and beat out everybody else, it took everything. So I would say don't despise the little things, meaning like don't kind of put these things on the back burner, oh, they're unpaid, I'm kind of above that. Don't think like that, especially at the start of it, because those actually lead to really great things. Because from that internship, I worked really closely with a well-respected planning professional who gave me an amazing reference for my next internship, and that kind of snowballed into the third. So that really helped me out a lot. So I would say first and foremost, like I said, don't think about unpaid or volunteer or anything like that. The other thing I would suggest is that people think out of the box. One of I guess it was maybe the second position I'd ever gotten offered was a planning position at a law firm, which a lot of planners don't think about, but law firms that deal with land use planning or land use and development, they usually have planners on staff, at least one or two, that have to know their policies sort of inside and out, and they're seen as experts for the lawyers who go to them for consultation. So I would start looking around and seeing what law firms were hiring, and if they weren't, I'd still give them a call or maybe an email. And that really stood out to them because they'd come back and they'd remember my name and they'd say, what, this girl was really persistent. Let's just shut her up and bring her in. So that really helped.
And they pay well.
And they pay well, yeah. and you know what's sad to say is I actually turned that one down because I had gotten offered another job much closer, so I guess it worked out. But anyway, that was another one too. You have to think out of the box. And I guess the third biggest thing too is networking. I was kind of tireless about that. Every OPPI event for a while, I was out there. I would always volunteer to be on different committees. And through that, I met a ton of great people. And again, exchanging contact information, an email here and there, a phone call, and they really remember you. So after a while, you become someone that's recognizable, familiar face, and you become more credible over time because you gain a reputation and they know that you can follow through, you keep in touch, and you're likable. That's another thing too, be likable as much as you can.
Okay, well, didn't intern anywhere, so don't have any advice about that, but I can say volunteering, and I've always started volunteering since I've been working, and let me premise that I didn't have that background because when I was in school, I was busy working 3 full-time jobs while I was working, and if I would have known the advice that these people have, I probably would have tried to have a job in something that actually dealt with environmental, but I had a few jobs at the time, paid well, and I just didn't have the time because I was too busy focusing on getting a good education that I didn't think that far in the future. But looking back, yeah, if you can volunteer, network, come to these events, meet people, talk to people. Now, like I volunteer at Pollution Probe, I'm part of the Toronto Construction Association, the CAC-GB. There are so many different things that I'm involved in now because I have the time now. Well, not really, but I make the time. But if you can put aside half an hour every couple weeks, you're absolutely right. The relationships that you can develop will help you. Maybe not today, maybe not in a year, but
Next time.
You never know. Like I've met people at other events and I'm like, Sally, like what's up? How's it going? I haven't seen her in years and now she's working for government. Maybe you could help me out, maybe you couldn't. Maybe they could just provide a feedback, something I can bounce off ideas, or vice versa. This is the policy we're putting in place. How do you think it's working in industry? Let's sit down and let's talk. But if I didn't have created that relationship a year or two ago, maybe she would walk by and I would walk by and we'd never know each other could benefit each other. So yeah, I echo what everyone's saying.
It's great advice. And doing panels like this across different sectors, we hear over and over again how important networking is and how important it is to be out there and meeting people who you could eventually help out and who might be able to help you out. And for writing all of those hundreds of job applications, there's a lot of support for that at the Career Center and support for finding internships, and we do have an internship program too. So if you'd like to ask me about that later, please do. So I'd like to open up the floor to questions from people here. I'd just like to ask that you stand up so that everyone can hear your question. And just state whether you're addressing your question to the whole panel or just one or two panelists. So who has a question?
Okay. Hello, everyone. This question is for all the panelists. My name is Karina. I'm in my 3rd year. I'm also in the internship program here. My question to everyone is, do you have any suggestions for staying relevant and resilient in this field in difficult times? You mentioned writing skills in language. That is definitely something I noted. But is there anything else that you may have missed? Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, writing skills are important, and always improving your communication skills. I personally put aside in my own personal budget a professional development sort of part of like what I will spend on professional development in a given year. Generally that's tax deductible, so you kind of get part of it back at the following year, but basically I invest in myself. Last year I took a design course through Simon Fraser University. It was a one-off course. It was in Ottawa. I stayed with friends, also MESers, in Ottawa, and we hung out. We took this entire like module essentially on how to communicate through drawing and through presentation. So basically, those people who stand up and they're doing like the flow charts and flip charts, but they're also like in terms of a land use planning design, they're saying, oh yeah, so you'd like a sidewalk this wide and you want trees like this. They taught that skill. Like how do you stand up in front of people and freehand draw something that gets people talking? How do you create those concepts on paper? So that was last year's. So I personally put aside money for keeping my skills up and diversifying them as well, so that would never be covered in my, like, it has nothing to do with my job right now. Like that's just not what I do. But who knows what I'll do in the future and when that will be useful. So I look forward to always continually learning and challenging myself with drawing in front of people. Yeah, didn't think I'd do that, but.
Just gonna follow up on that. Total agreement there that professional development and kind of honing your skills, taking some extra courses online. You can even do a couple. Sometimes they have night courses at colleges for like specialization. You could do like a GIS. A lot of planners or environmental studies students do that, or some sort of urban design, just to kind of keep themselves a little bit ahead of the pack and also to improve your own knowledge and skills. The other thing I would mention, and I think I would really urge a lot of the students who are still even starting out to do is, when I was still just starting out in the MES program, I started approaching different journals and magazines because I wanted to write little small pieces just to kind of get out there. And that actually ended up being a really a good move in the end, because what happens usually is that you have a little blurb and talks about where you're going to school and what you're doing, what your interests are, and a lot of employers read these magazines and these journals, and once they see that you have good writing skills, that you're putting yourself out there, and that you've got some knowledge, you've got a good knowledge base, and that you have initiative, that really sticks in their heads. So sometimes I'd go on interviews and they'd say, you know what, now that you mention it, I remember reading like a short article you did on such and such. And you can say, yeah, I did, and you can get these writing skills if you hire me. So it really helps. That's just a little little side note.
Sure, yeah. I would just add that in terms of your question, being resilient in difficult times, I think that a few things to keep in mind in difficult and in non-difficult times are a commitment to lifelong learning is essentially what Lauralyn is saying. Life is short. We're here for a short amount of time. And I think it's great to fill one's life with learning about as much as you can, about anything you can, anything that you're interested in, learn about it. It makes you a more interesting, complete, capable person. That's what it's all about. And then the other thing I would say is, I think when I was a student, I really didn't like the term networking. I just found it kind of annoying, I think. Like, who wants to go, like, schmooze. Something somewhat unpalatable about it. So I'm just going to maybe reframe it. Another way to think about it, and we've talked about it, is just forming relationships. And that's what it's about. I think there's these are three things that I really think are important to one's life. Like a commitment to lifelong learning, an emphasis on relationships, first and foremost a relationship with yourself, feeling confident and loving yourself in order to have healthy relationships with other people, and then commitment to a cause, stand for something and pursue it. And so with regards to the networking thing, I'm all about forming relationships with people, and when I go out to like an event like this, I'm just really looking forward to hearing what you're all about, and I'll let you know that I'm open to collaboration. Like our organization and the work that I do is all about thinking creatively, being innovative, and being open to new collaboration opportunities. And so when you're going to a networking event, just think about establishing relationships with people, because that's what helps you through those difficult times. That's what can make you resilient, like a community of practice, a community of people that can support you, and give you resources and that you can support as well. That gives meaning to your life. That's important.
Anyone else want to add?
If I was going to contribute something quickly, I would just say that, to second the point about networking, I was thinking the same thing actually as we were talking about it. But whatever I can contribute on this topic might seem maybe it's not significant given that I'm just starting out in my career. I haven't been faced with needing to update my skills at this point yet to stay relevant, to advance to something else quite yet. But generally speaking, I would think that if you're engaged in the subject matter in terms of the policy debates, what's going on related to your field, that will do you really well. Technical skills are always going to change, and if you're doing something like GIS, you're going to have to go back, you're going to have to do training. But if you're doing something that's a little more broad, just stay relevant by being plugged in, find out what's going on, read your journals, read your, the newspaper, or, if you're getting on a tablet or something like that. I don't even know if you can call it a paper anymore. But yeah, and I think that's probably one of the best things to do. And it also speaks to Michael's point about just take an interest. It's the beautiful thing about hopefully your job is that it excites you and it's something you enjoy doing. So go with it.
If you love what you do, you're going to immerse yourself in that space. You're going to read stuff about it. You're going to go to events that are relevant to it. You're going to hook up with organizations that are relevant to that cause. You're going to volunteer for it because you love what you do. So know who you are and find what you love. And
the people
that
don't love what they do, are not the people that are going to stay plugged in. And those are the people that get weeded out. And those are the people that stay or become irrelevant or outdated, I think. Time will tell if we're right on that. Maybe.
Sometimes people just end up in
they're lucky.
Comfortable.
They're comfortable and they do their job effectively and well, and
they get weeded out.
and they go home at 4:00. Yeah.
It's
you
true.
Not want to be one of those
It's a job without a lot of heavy lifting, and they lucked out. So.
I mean, that's why I bring up the point of commitment to a cause and cultivating that within yourself, because if that's your mentality, then you'll have a mentality of continuous improvement. You'll never rest on your laurels, because we could always do better because we face such enormous challenges. There's so much that needs to be done. Let's all participate in solving the solutions. We're never going to achieve it unless we always push forward.
How do you feel that where you are now, like how do you feel that, do you feel like your dreams back then have aligned with where you are now? Or is it totally different, or just, you know, thinking for myself for the future? Yeah.
I guess I'll get started with that. Do you want to start? Do you want to?
No.
Okay. I pretty much, yeah, I guess, well, your mind changes a little bit over time. Like, of course, we all know that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I was so excited. And then I realized as I got older that I couldn't see children in pain. So that just totally changed everything for me. And then I kind of switched gears. But pretty much, I think from when I finalized my thinking in, I guess, second year of my undergrad, yeah, pretty much I think my destination now where I'm at is sort of where I pictured I would be around now. Actually, I think I've been pretty lucky. Maybe I didn't think I'd reach this place quite so quickly, but I think that was just a lot of hard work and putting in my time and perseverance. And of course, that's not done yet. I still have to see my journey. But yeah, pretty much I think I would say so. But I have to say, I think you get a real good sense of satisfaction if that does end up happening to you. Well, I think it does. It's a product of hard work and, again, persistence. And I think it will end up there if you put those two sort of ingredients together and you keep at it. So I think that was a big part of it. And I can say I'm pretty happy. And I think for most people, as long as you keep at it, I think you'll get there too. I don't think there's any doubt. It's just maybe it takes longer for some people and less for others.
I can say with some assurance that when I left my BES degree and I was forming a not-for-profit film collective, that writing a zoning bylaw was not really on my radar. And I write a lot of zoning bylaws amendments. So I can honestly say that time is what I do now is, I think, enormously valuable, and the way that I implement policy and create consensus and the legal agreements that will bind land, basically going forward, at least for most of my agreements, run at least 20 years. And then the enforcement of those agreements on land developers and the owners who come after. I didn't know what the word estoppel meant. I do now, and it still doesn't matter to me in really when I talk to people on an everyday basis. So it's an interesting intersection in being able to communicate, which was what my interest was when I was doing that not-for-profit film collective, but being able to communicate both to future generations through these laws and these very legal agreements, but also with everyday people who are, and rightfully concerned about the fact that they are going to have to move. And that's what it comes down to. These people are displaced through this development process, and how do we make their life manageable through that process? So it's that communication of being able to go from the bylaw all the way to, so yeah, you're going to have to move, and it's going to be in 3 months. How do we help you out? Is just it's a massive gap. So.
Yeah, go please.
Okay, so when I first started, I already told you guys I wanted to be a psychiatrist, but when I switched over to BES, I was guaranteed going to be the lead of government, writing every policy that's ever going to be instituted for environmental law. Then I took an environmental law class and decided I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want any case to be in discovery phase for 10 years. I'd probably shoot myself in the head, because I'm the type person, here's an issue, let's figure out the facts, let's deal with it, move on, what's the next issue? Couldn't do it. Did I want to deal with asbestos and mold? No. But now I'm in a really amazing position. I'm the lead of a big construction company who is listening and adopting environmental plans to better themselves, to be more socially responsible. We're going to be taking the lead against other big construction companies. Don't know how much they know about construction, but I'm not going to name names because then I'll and I'm on record, so I can't. But I had this amazing opportunity to make a change that I wanted to do in this grand scheme of all of Canada, but I can make in the communities that we live in. So did it shape in the way I thought it would? No, but have I manifested it in the way that I want? Yeah. Yes.
When I told a friend who also did the MES program with me that I was going to do this career panel, and I just asked what his advice was, and he sent me to watch a convocation speech by this guy named Tim Minchin. Has anybody ever seen that convocation speech by Tim Minchin? Okay, well, I recommend you check this out. It's pretty awesome. It's like 8 or 10 minutes of really insightful wisdom. And so he talks about this idea of having dreams when you're young. And I buy into his take on it, so I'll reinterpret it in my own way and tell you what he said. He said basically that like if you're young, and a lot of people are when they have dreams that they want to pursue, and they know that's what they want to do, fantastic. That's totally awesome, and pursue that. The challenge, though, is that if you're so myopic, if you're so focused on this dream, you might miss what's on the periphery. And a lot of people have talked about this throughout the day, that being open to other opportunities beyond what you perceive as your dream in a given moment of time could be worth your while. So what he instead advocates for is short-term goals that you pursue with passion and with dedication, and that you're proud to pursue. And that leaves yourself some leeway to be open to the other routes that make themselves available through time. So that's what I would say through. That's what Tim would say through me.
Just very quickly, I would say that I'm not. I didn't have a dream for what I'd be doing, right out of school, and if I did, this certainly isn't it. But at the same time, I think that's probably typical of many people in MES or in the BES program. I take issue with the idea that well, for a lot of people, dreaming is about what kind of prestige will I have in a particular role, what kind of attention will I get. It's very focused on the self. Let's just put it that way. And I think too few people dream about what they are just going to contribute to a greater picture and a dream world or something like that, if you want to frame it that way. And so I would say, if you take a more general approach, to what kind of world I want to contribute to, and that's your dream, it's pretty hard to, find yourself doing, a variety of different tasks that are not going to line up with that, assuming you're, staying principled and focused in how you're going about getting those jobs.
Nicely put. Yeah, I completely agree with that. The sense of, if your dream is to be of service, and be of service in whatever way that the opportunity provides, then it's really easy to see whether it's like asbestos removal or whatever. It's really easy to align your specific task with your overall dream of being of service to the world. It's a great way of putting it.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes, Richard?
My name is Victoria, and I'm in my final year of BES, and right now I'm in the middle of graduate school application hell. So, this is for the whole panel, and I guess I just wanted to ask for everybody that did do bachelor's programs. But
I denied. I applied, accepted, or got accepted, and denied.
I just wanted to know what your respective bachelor's programs, what you felt it prepared you for, what you feel it didn't prepare you for, and just sort of, was it worth it? Yes.
Can I start? Mm-hmm. So I did my undergrad here at York at Schulich, my undergrad in finance and economics. And I felt that really prepared me for a variety of different things. It gave me an understanding of the language that most people in the professional world, in the business world speak. but it didn't really provide much by way of like orientation. I had no idea what I wanted to do with those skills, which is why I came back and I did my master's, and it allowed me an opportunity to focus. Now, not everybody when they go back to graduate school is going to have that sort of purpose. They will maybe are much clearer about what for example, you want to do, but yeah, I find a lot of people doing a bachelor's degree and they still don't really know what they want. And you can either go back and you can do a general degree, as I did, or you can work for a little bit and get a feel for things. It's really up to you and what finances allow and all that kind of stuff, and family plans and whatnot. But yeah, there's no set way.
So yeah, I definitely agree with what James said. I think that in a sense, the undergrad degrees, some of them are pretty focused, but most of them, I'd say, sort of leave you hanging. You really don't know what direction you can take. And in that sense, the hands-on aspect of university is sort of what's lacking sometimes, and I'm sure you're going to hear that from a lot of people. You might be able to get more of that, of course, once you delve into graduate school, and that's where you're supposed to get that experience. But your undergraduate degrees generally are a little bit more ambiguous, sometimes more general, and that was the experience of most of my friends. They'd get to the end of it, they'd graduate, and they'd say, oh, darn it, like I got a degree in this, and now I don't know what I'm going to do with this. So a lot of them either had to specialize, they'd go back to school to do like a master's, or a lot of people had to go to college, and they said, I need some sort of specialization, let me go somewhere where I can get it. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think sort of the hands-on experience and some sort of direction as to what you can do with something like that, I think that's sort of what's lacking. As for what I learned, definitely it helps you with, as you get forward with your writing skills, time management, you need to be able to manage different assignments, so that sort of evolves into project management, and that's really helpful. So if you don't go further, you've got those skills, and if you do want to specialize, there's other options too. So whatever grad options that you're considering, I mean, you'll probably get it there. But yeah, but there's pros and cons, of course, to everything.
I like Michael, I pursued an undergraduate in the BES because it allowed me, unlike most of the other programs that were being offered at the time, was that I could ask questions. And I was intensely curious about the world, and I still am, and I wanted to pursue that curiosity. So I took my BES and I got the most out of it. And at the end of it, the professors were like, you should do your master's. And I said, no. I am not interested in writing another paper ever. I am tired of reading. I am tired of sitting in rooms where people talk to me all day about things that they are intensely passionate about that I do not care about right now. So I am done. And then I went back to school. But it was a lot later, and I had done a whole bunch of other things, and I came back to school again with questions. And I was like, I want to pursue answers, and I wanted to pursue change. I want to know that I can make this change in the world, that I want the world to be a better place, and I want to get there. And my master's program was mostly about involving community into decision making, and also, as a side, looking at infrastructure and how sustainability, infrastructure, neoliberalism, and a whole bunch of other sort of macro processes come together in the suburbs, in particular because I wanted to know more about suburbs. And so I pursued sort of two things simultaneously. One I got published for, and the other one I got my MRP for. So I did effectively almost a double major in my master's, but because I was intensely curious and I wanted to pursue it. I mean, you get out of it what you put in. If you are intensely passionate and interested, opportunities come up. A master's program, some of them are like, I mean, my BES, I did no internships either in my BES. I worked full-time the whole time. But master's program, you're required to do internships for the planning at least. So we were required to do internships. And that gave me, using those as an opportunity to leverage, but also doing my own volunteer work on the side, gave me an opportunity to see a lot of different things that I wouldn't necessarily have seen otherwise. And a master's program gave me the ability to focus on that in a way that if I'd been pursuing it in my spare time, that I never would have been able to ask the same questions. So it was intensely valuable for me.